Aria stood in the doorway of her new bedroom, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on her chest. The old house was supposed to be a fresh start after the divorce, but instead it felt cold and unfamiliar, just like her relationship with her parents. She let out a long breath and ran her fingers through her hair, trying to suppress the gnawing unease creeping up her spine. Against the far wall stood an old mirror. The frame was carved with vines and flowers, darkened with age, giving it a strange, almost organic look, like it had been waiting there for years just for her. Her mom's voice echoed from downstairs. "Aria, you unpacked yet?" "Almost," she called back, though she'd barely started. She moved closer to the mirror, glancing at her reflection. Something about it unsettled her. The reflection looked just like her, of course, same wavy brown hair, same tired eyes, but there was a sense of wrongness, as if the reflection didn't quite belong to her. She shook her head, breaking the trance. "It's just a mirror," she told herself. A few days later, Aria sat in front of the mirror, brushing out her hair before school. She paused mid-stroke, frowning. Her reflection seemed off. There was a slight delay, like a laggy video feed. When she turned her head to the side, the reflection followed just a fraction of a second too late. Her stomach tightened. She blinked hard and looked again, but this time everything seemed normal. At school, her best friend Chloe noticed her distracted state. "Aria, are you good? You look like you saw a ghost," Chloe said, chewing on the end of her pencil. "It's nothing. Just weird stuff in my new house," Aria muttered. "There's this mirror, and I swear it, never mind. You'll think I'm crazy." "Oh no," Chloe said, grinning. "You think it's haunted, don't you?" "Not haunted, just weird." Chloe laughed. "You're spending way too much time alone. Get out of your head." Aria laughed with her, but the knot in her chest remained. That night, she stared at the mirror from her bed. Moonlight glinted off the glass, and for a moment, it almost looked like her reflection was watching her. She rolled over, pulling the blanket over her head. The real trouble started a few nights later. Aria stood in front of the mirror, brushing her teeth. When it happened, her reflection smiled. Not just a quick twitch of the lips, but a slow, deliberate grin that spread across her face. Aria froze, toothbrush halfway to her mouth. She wasn't smiling. Her lips were still pressed in confusion. Yet the reflection stared back at her with an expression that could only be described as smug. She dropped the toothbrush, heart pounding in her chest. "Nope," she whispered. "This isn't real. I'm just tired." Backing away from the mirror, she flicked off the bathroom light and jumped into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She stayed awake for what felt like hours, every creak of the old house making her flinch. When sleep finally came, it was restless and filled with strange dreams of shifting shadows and whispering voices. Over the next few days, the mirror's strange behavior became impossible to ignore. Aria tried to convince herself it was her imagination. Stress from the divorce, maybe. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. She started checking the mirror constantly. Every time she walked by, she glanced at it, just to make sure everything was normal. It rarely was. Sometimes her reflection was just a second behind her. Other times, it seemed to linger in the glass even after she stepped away. Once she saw it wink at her. That night, Aria decided she'd had enough. She grabbed an old blanket and threw it over the mirror, her hands shaking. "Not tonight," she whispered to herself. But when she woke the next morning, the blanket was gone, neatly folded at the foot of her bed. She stared at it, heart hammering in her chest. "What the hell?" she whispered. Her mom's voice called from the kitchen downstairs, cheerful and oblivious. "Aria, breakfast." Aria didn't answer. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the mirror, dread settling in the pit of her stomach. Something was happening, something she didn't understand, and it was getting worse. The breaking point came late one night. Aria woke up suddenly, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she thought she heard someone breathing beside her. She sat up, scanning the dark room, but everything seemed normal. Her gaze drifted to the mirror. Her reflection was gone. She scrambled out of bed, panic gripping her. "No, no, no," she whispered, stumbling toward the mirror. She pressed her hands against the cold glass, as if she could somehow call her reflection back. Then, slowly, the reflection appeared again, drifting into view like smoke clearing from a mirror's surface. But it didn't mimic Aria's fear-stricken expression. Instead, it smiled, a slow, wicked grin that spread across its face like it was enjoying her fear. Then the reflection raised a hand. It waved mockingly as if saying, "See you soon." Aria stumbled back, her pulse racing. She knew, without a doubt, that the thing in the mirror wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was something else entirely. and it was watching her. Aria tried to pretend that everything was normal, but the reflection's smug grin haunted her. She avoided the mirror as much as possible, but every time she stepped into her room, she felt its pull. It was like Iris. That's what she'd started calling the reflection, was always waiting, lurking in the glass. At first, the changes were subtle. Her friends began acting strange around her. Chloe, who had always been her confidant, gave her cold looks at school, as if something about Aria disgusted her. "Did I do something wrong?" Aria asked one day, catching Chloe's arm between classes. Chloe shrugged her off, frowning. "You said some weird stuff yesterday. What's going on with you?" "What do you mean?" "I didn't." Aria stopped, heart sinking. She hadn't even seen Chloe the day before. "You've been acting off," Chloe muttered before walking away, leaving Aria standing in the hall, chilled to the bone. Aria knew then. Iris was already reaching into her life. That night, Aria sat on the floor across from the mirror, hugging her knees. The reflection sat cross-legged too, a mirror version of her, but with that eerie, knowing grin plastered across its face. "You can stop fighting it, you know," Iris whispered, her voice a low hum that seemed to vibrate inside Aria's head. Aria stiffened. You can talk?" Her voice sounded small, fragile. Iris tilted her head, looking amused. "Of course. I've always been here, waiting for you to notice me." Aria's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" Iris leaned closer, her grin widening. "I want what you want. To be free. Let's switch places, Aria. Just for one night. You'll get to escape this life. No stress, no expectations. I'll handle everything. Doesn't that sound perfect?" Aria's skin crawled. "No. Stay out of my life." Iris rolled her eyes, her expression shifting into something darker, almost pitying. "You can't stop me, Aria. I'm already here." The next evening, curiosity got the better of her. Aria reached out to touch the surface of the mirror, and the glass rippled like the surface of a pond. Before she could pull her hand back, she was sucked into the mirror world. The room she found herself in looked like a distorted version of her own, familiar, but slightly wrong. The air smelled stale, and the colors were muted, like the world was drained of life. Furniture was in reversed positions, shadows moved unnaturally across the walls, and whispers floated through the air, repeating her thoughts in a strange, eerie echo. "I shouldn't be here." A low laugh echoed through the room. Aria turned and saw Iris standing behind her, wearing a version of her school uniform. "Welcome," Iris said, smiling brightly. "You like it? It's so much quieter here. No nagging parents, no drama. Just us." Aria backed away. "Let me out." Iris shook her head, still smiling. "You have to stay until I say you can leave. That's the rule." Aria felt her heart pounding in her chest. "What happens if I don't?" "Then you'll be trapped here forever," Iris whispered, her grin widening. "And I'll get to live your life, every second of it." Aria tried to find her way back to the real world, but the mirror house was like a maze. Doors opened into endless hallways, and when she ran, her footsteps echoed unnaturally, like someone was following her. Her own shadow twisted on the walls, moving in ways she couldn't control. She found old mirrors in every room, each with a reflection that wasn't quite her own. Different versions of Aria, staring at her from other lifetimes. They whispered to her, voices filled with regret and warning. "We couldn't escape either. You can't trust her. Once she takes your place, you're gone forever." Desperate, Aria ran from room to room, searching for the exit. She finally found the mirror leading back to her world, but Iris wasn't on the other side. Aria pounded on the glass. "Iris, let me out," she cried. The glass shimmered, and after a moment, Iris's face appeared, grinning wildly. "Not yet," she whispered. "I like it out here." Aria stared in horror as Iris waved at her from the other side of the glass. "I'll take good care of your life," Iris teased. "Don't worry, you won't miss a thing." Then, with a wink, Iris stepped fully into Aria's world, leaving Aria trapped behind the glass. "No!" Aria screamed, pounding against the mirror. But the surface had solidified, cold and unyielding. On the other side, Iris adjusted Aria's hair and smiled at her reflection. "Let's see how long it takes them to notice the difference," Iris whispered, before turning and walking out of the room, leaving Aria behind, helpless, panicked, and completely alone. Aria pressed her forehead against the glass, breathing heavily as the world around her twisted into shadows. Time was slipping away, and she knew deep down that if she didn't act fast, Iris would take over her life permanently. Aria stood in front of the cold glass, watching her reflection move freely in the real world as Iris, laughing, smiling, and stealing her life. Every time Aria pounded on the mirror, the sound echoed hollowly through the twisted, empty rooms behind her. She wandered through the labyrinth of her distorted house, finding fragments of memories reflected in cracked mirrors. Her mother crying on the phone, Chloe looking angry and confused, her classmates gossiping about how weird Aria had become. These visions cut into her like shards of glass. Time was running differently here. Days in the real world passed like minutes in the mirror, and she knew the longer she stayed trapped, the harder it would be to return. Her breathing was shallow as the reality set in. Iris was stealing everything, and if Aria didn't act quickly, she'd fade away entirely, just like the other lost souls she had seen in this world. Through different mirrors, Aria watched Iris wreak havoc on her life. At school, Iris flirted with Aria's crush, Ryan, drawing him into conversations that Aria never would have dared to start. But it wasn't all charm. Iris was also dangerous. She pushed Chloe away with cruel comments, sowing tension between them. At home, Iris became distant and moody with Aria's mom, who now seemed more suspicious than ever. Aria clenched her fists, screaming in frustration, but her voice echoed uselessly through the glass walls of her prison. How could she fight back when she wasn't even real anymore? One night, Aria encountered other trapped reflections in the mirror world, shadowy versions of people who had been replaced by their own mirror twins. They whispered warnings, their voices laced with despair. "You have to act soon," one of them rasped. "The longer she stays in your body, the more the world will forget you." Another figure whispered the most chilling warning of all. "If you don't switch back by the next full moon, you'll disappear. Forever." Aria's hands trembled. "How do I get out?" she asked. "You have to confront her," one voice whispered. "And you have to believe you're stronger than her." The reflection of a young boy leaned closer, his eyes filled with fear. "Whatever you do, don't let her convince you that you're weak. That's how she wins." Aria knew she needed to catch Iris off guard. She found a jagged shard of glass from one of the cracked mirrors in the labyrinth and used it to cut a shallow line across her palm. The mirror's surface shimmered with the power of the ritual, and Aria's reflection in the glass began to ripple, merging with Iris's image on the other side. It was dangerous. If she made a mistake, she'd be trapped forever. But Aria was done being afraid. She had to reclaim her life. Back in the real world, Iris stood in front of the mirror, tilting her head curiously. She must have sensed the ritual beginning, because her smug grin returned. Well, Iris said through the glass. "Trying to fight back now, are we?" Aria pressed her hand against the mirror, her blood smearing across the surface. "I'm taking my life back," she whispered. Iris's grin faltered for the first time. "You, please. You've always wanted to disappear. I'm just doing you a favor." The words hit Aria like a punch to the gut. "She's trying to weaken me again." The other reflections had warned her about this. "Not this time," Aria hissed. "You're not stronger than me." The mirror trembled as Aria focused all her willpower on the ritual. "This is my life. I belong here. Not you." The surface of the mirror rippled violently as both girls, Aria and Iris, tried to pull themselves through. Their faces blurred in the glass, becoming indistinguishable, a chaotic swirl of identical features. "Give up," Iris shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. "You know you're not enough." Aria gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the glass until her palms bled. "You're wrong," she whispered fiercely. "I am enough, and I will never let you take my life." With one final, desperate push, Aria lunged forward, shattering the mirror into 1,000 shards. Both girls tumbled through the broken pieces, pulled back into the real world in a blinding flash. Aria gasped as she hit the cold floor of her room. The mirror was shattered, shards of glass scattered everywhere. She lay still for a moment, catching her breath, her body aching from the struggle. Slowly, she sat up and looked around. Everything was quiet. The reflection, the twisted version of herself, was gone. But had she really won? She touched her face, her hair, her hands, feeling the realness of her body. Was she herself again? Just then, her bedroom door creaked open. Her mom poked her head in, looking tired. "Aria? You okay? I thought I heard something break." Aria managed a small smile. "Yeah, I'm fine, Mom." Her mom hesitated, studying her for a moment. Then, satisfied, she closed the door and left Aria alone in the room. Aria stood slowly and turned to the shattered mirror, her breath catching in her throat. In one of the shards on the floor, she saw her reflection, and it winked at her.